Hi, my name is Rubin Miller, and I'd like to welcome you to this first of the series of Gimp. Gimp, as you might know, is an image editing program, and unlike its better known cousin Photoshop, it is entirely free of charge. It's not a pirate copy or anything like that. It's not illegal. It is entirely free of charge. So let's take a look at the interface of Gimp. First of all, I'm working on a Mac, so if you're using a PC, things might look slightly different. Instead of seeing the menus on the top of the screen as you do here, you'll see them in what's called the application window, which is this window over here. So they'll always be at the top of the application window. If you're working on a Mac, they'll always be at the top of your screen. On the left-hand side, we've got this very large-looking thing called a toolbar. And as you can see, there are lots and lots of different tools. Now, when you first look at it, it's fairly confusing, I must admit, because there's so many tools, you really wonder how you're going to remember all of them. Well, you don't actually have to, because by resting your cursor on any tool at all, a tooltip will pop up and tell you what the tool is and what it actually does. To make your life even simpler than that, Gimp has been around for a long time, so there are quite a lot of tools. Most of them you might never ever use. Some of them you use all the time, and a few of them you'll only use very occasionally. At the bottom of what looks like the toolbar are the tool options, this area where my cursor is. Now the tool options are very, very context sensitive. So they actually show you the different options you have for each tool depending on which tool you click on. At the moment you can see that my airbrush is selected, and the tool options allow me to change the mode of the airbrush, the opacity, what kind of brush I'm using, the size of the brush, aspect ratios and so on. If I click on a totally different tool, that one for example, you'll see that because I've now selected my rectangle tool, the tool options for the rectangle tool are totally different. If I click on my clone stamp tool, once again, the options are totally different to what they were before. Tools are very much like the kinds of tools you'd find in your kitchen or workshop. The only difference is in your kitchen or workshop, when you pick up a tool, you can put it down and then have nothing in your hand. With the tools in Gimp, you'll always have a tool in your hand, and that will remain in your hand until you choose a different tool. So try and use the metaphor of working in a kitchen or a workshop. Whichever tool you use, if you're choosing the paintbrush, for example, you can have big brushes or small brushes. You can have totally opaque paint, as in oil paint, or you can drag the opacity down to simulate something more like watercolor. And the same goes with any tool at all. Over in the center, we have this window, which is known as the application window. And that's where we see our image that we're currently working on. So to get an image, we can go to the File menu, go down to Open, and a dialog box pops up, which allows us to navigate our way around. So in this case, I'm going to go to my folder. We'll go to Tutorials, and we'll go to the Gimp tutorials and shoot, and I'll go to adjustments number 3. We'll see that that brings up the photo that I selected, and that's what will appear in the application window. When you're working on fine detail, you might want to magnify your view, not change the size of the image, but just change your view of the image. And to do that, we have a special tool, this guy over here, which is called the zoom tool. Now, when you click on the zoom tool, you can see that you can either zoom in or zoom out, and you can also auto resize windows. To use the zoom tool, you just bring it onto your image, and you'll see your pointer changes into what looks like three shapes. A white arrow, which indicates the tip of your pointer, a small magnifying glass, which indicates that you've got your zoom tool, and a plus sign. The plus sign indicates that we're going to zoom in. So by simply clicking, we can zoom in. At the bottom of your window, you can see the magnification. I'm currently at 150%. It also gives me the name of the image that we're working on, as well as the size. By clicking a couple more times, we zoom in further and further. You can actually resize your window by clicking at the bottom right-hand corner and just dragging out. We can also zoom out by clicking on this button in the zoom, the tool option panel, and you'll see that your pointer now has a minus sign instead of a plus sign. So by clicking a few times, we zoom out. So to zoom in, you can click on that button over there and click a few times, or you can click and drag what's called a marquee. That faint rectangle that I've drawn is called a marquee. And when you release your mouse, the area of the marquee now fills your window. An easy way of zooming out, instead of going back to our tool options all the time, is to simply hold down your command key or control key on the PC. You'll see when you hold down your command key or the control key, the plus sign turns to a minus. So we can zoom out that way, or we can come down to the double-headed arrows and simply click on one of those and zoom out to whichever scale we want. So once again, to zoom in, you can just click. To zoom out, hold down the command or control key on a PC and click a few times, or simply use the sizing button at the bottom left-hand side to decide what kind of zoom level you want to move in at. Now, when you are doing fine adjustments on an image, you often do want to zoom into a fairly high level, but you then want to navigate around your image. Now, I know on both the PC and the Mac you have these scroll bars. To be honest, they are very, very cumbersome. But what we have in the bottom right-hand corner is a navigation panel. And if you click and hold on that navigation panel, you see a small thumbnail of the entire image with an even smaller rectangle in the center. By just dragging that rectangle around, you can navigate around your image. We'll just zoom back to 100%. And now we'll take a look at what's happening on the right-hand side of our screen. So on the right-hand side of the screen, we've got what looks like one very, very complex panel. In actual fact, it's a group of panels, and they call them dialog boxes. Up the top, we can see that we have little tabs, just like we have on the old-fashioned filing cards. And the first one tells us that we've got our layers selected. If we click on the next tab, you'll see that the area underneath here changes, and instead of layers, we've now got our channels. That's for our paths, and that's for our undo history. You might notice that as you click on these different tabs, the area in this window changes, but nothing happens around here. And that is because these are actually more dialogues. So at the moment we've got brushes. If we click on this tab over here, we've got patterns, and the third one opens gradients. So as we click on these different tabs, what happens in this area changes, but nothing changes over here. So in actual fact, what we've got are 4 dialogues on the top and 3 at the bottom. So that's 7 totally different panels on the right-hand side. Now you're probably thinking that this is terribly confusing, and I would suggest that you're actually quite right. We really don't need all these panels or dialogues. We can actually break them apart. And the way you do that is to click on a tab and just drag it into your application window. You can now see that it's formed a separate panel or dialog all of its own. And to close it, we can just click on the close button. We could do the same to patterns and close that. And we can do exactly the same thing to gradients and close that. Now, in actual fact, those 3 dialogues which I've just closed are dialogues that you very, very seldom will use. So we've all got our own way of working, of course, but I prefer to keep them closed because I hardly ever use them, and I just find them cluttering the screen and in the way and fairly confusing. There are actually a few more dialogues that we can close. Unless you're an advanced user, you probably won't be using channels. So we can click on the Channels tab and drag that into our application window and close that. And we can do the same with paths and close that. We've now got a much cleaner interface. So instead of the 7 dialogues that we had on the right-hand side before, we've now just got 2 layers and undo history. You can, of course, also drag the Tool Option tab into your screen and close it. Now, I don't recommend you do that because your tools are fairly useless unless you can change the options. But it does happen that you inadvertently do something like that, and you need to bring back some of those dialogues. In fact, you might even inadvertently close your toolbox, which means that you now can't actually work on your image at all unless you get your toolbox back. Well, fortunately, there's a very, very simple way of doing it. All those dialogues are hidden in the Windows menu. So if you click on the Windows menu, we can go down to Toolbox and your toolbox reappears. Now, I'm just going to drag it over to the left-hand side of the screen, which is where I like to use it. But as you can see, you can actually position it anywhere. If you're more comfortable having it on the right-hand side of the screen, by all means, move it there. I'm just used to using it on the left, so I'll put it on the left-hand side. Now I can actually resize the toolbar by putting my pointer on the right-hand side. You'll see my pointer becomes a double-headed horizontal arrow, and I can click and drag outwards or inwards. I can also make it longer or shorter. Now what's missing from the toolbar, of course, are the tool options. So once again, I can go into the window menu, go down to Dockable Dialogues, and find my tool options. Now my tool options will just float in the middle of the screen somewhere, unless I click on the tab that says Tool Options. When you do that, be careful not to click on the title bar, but on the tab itself, and just drag it onto your toolbox until the area under your toolbox turns blue. When you release it, it then docks with your toolbox. So that's pretty much the interface of Gimp. It's a really good idea to get used to playing with that interface by moving things around, closing dialogues, opening them up again from the Windows panel. So, for example, if you wanted something like your gradients to reappear, you can come down to dockable dialogues and find your gradients, and then once again click on the tab and drag it if you wanted to dock with your layers and undo history. You can just drag it into that position there, or you can drag it back into your application window and just simply drag it down here somewhere. If you drag the tab down here, you'll see that it turns blue and it now docks with the undo history and layers dialog boxes. I don't actually like using the gradients, so I'll just drag that out and close it. Now, if you are playing around with Gimp and you wanted to simply go back to the way it looked when you first started working, there is a simple way of doing it. On the Mac, you click on the Gimp menu and go to Preferences. On the PC, it's in the Edit menu. So you'll click on the Edit menu and go down to Preferences. When you do that, a great big dialog box appears, and there are all kinds of things you can change in there. What we really want to do is go to Windows Management and click on the button that says Reset Saved Window Position to Default Values. It will ask you to confirm that that's okay. Just click OK, and then once again click OK. Now you'll notice that nothing has changed at all, and that's because you have to restart Gimp. So let's go to the File menu and the Gimp menu, and quit Gimp. And then once again, we would have to relaunch Gimp. And you'll see that it opens in exactly the same way as it opened when you very, very first started using it. Once again, I'm just going to go to the File menu and go to Open. And you'll notice that something new appears in this dialog box. The new is a list of the last few images that you opened. So instead of having to navigate your way all the way back again, you can simply choose the last one that you opened and click on Open. Now, there are various ways of saving your image. One is to go to the File menu and go to Save As. Dialog box appears and it really asks you three things. The first thing it asks you is, what do you want to call this? And I'm just going to call this Fred. The next thing it asks you is, where do you want to put it? So you can choose exactly where you want to put it. We'll just choose the desktop in this case. Desktop. And it then finally asks you what format you want to save it as. Now, we can have all files, all images, all XCF images, GIMP and so on. It's a really good idea to save it as an XCF image. The reason for that is, as we'll see later, when you're working with GIMP, you'll want to create layers. And unfortunately, if you save it as any other format at all, GIMP won't open it in layers again. So you should choose a Gimp XCF image if it's an image that you want to continue working on at a later date. So we can just click on Save, and that will save it on our desktop in this case. However, if you want to send this off to somebody to be printed, or you want to email it to somebody, or perhaps put it on a website, unless the recipient has Gimp, XCF files are not recognized by very many programs. So it's a good idea to actually export it as a different format. So instead of clicking on the File menu and going down to Save As, we're going to go to Export As. Once again, the dialog box asks you a few different things. It asks you what name do you want to give it. We'll leave it as Fred. It asks where you want to put it. And then finally, it asks you which format you want to use. Now, if you click on that button, you'll see that you have a lot more formats than we had before. So we have things like Gimp, for example. We have TIFFs, which is a very good format to use if you want to carry on working on it, but with possibly a different program. We've also got JPEG, which is the ideal format to use if you're going to email it to someone or perhaps put it on a website. So once again, we can just simply export it, and we will now have a dialog box which asks us what compression level. So the higher the compression level, the poorer the quality. So you could make it maybe 2 or 3. Resolution, creation time, and so on. So we can just click on Export, and it's now exported as a JPEG. If we just move this out of the way, we'll see that's actually a JPEG, and that is our XCF file. So I hope this has been useful. Thank you for watching, and look out for episode 2 of this, where we take it a little bit further. I'm Rubin Miller. Cheers for now.